Hello, everybody. Graveless here, talking about, well, something that comes from your comments. A few people were wondering about off-meta starts, things that they thought were still good from older versions, and why I don't recommend them now. So we're going to discuss a few off-meta start picks, along with important small and mid-sized nations that you might want to consider adding to what you're taking on many games. So, let's get started off with off-meta starts. The big one being India. India used to be a decent start. It no longer is, and that's for a variety of reasons, but the big one being is that when you look at India, you have to not look at India for what it is, but compare India to what you would get if you went for the US or China instead. And that's the way in which India really does not live up to as much as it used to. Like, used to be you could turn India into a mega research state not necessarily faster than China, but fast enough that it was still a viable start. The slowdown on making use of its tremendous population has really hurt it in that regard. And the main reason for that is that at the start of the game, if you take India, what you basically have is a poorer United States in terms of what it does. So, like, it is flawed democracy, but that can be fixed. It has not that great education, really low wealth, and is suffering from pretty bad unrest problems caused by its not great cohesion. The same sort of things that you're going to have to do with the US, you're going to have to do with India. You have to fix it up before it will start doing anything really useful for you. The problem is that the road to fixing the US is short, and the road to fixing India is long. Also, if we compare India to China, we basically see, all right, similar population figures. China has 2.5 times the GDP, a full extra point of education, and it's authoritarian, so you don't have to worry about having a counselor continuously babysitting it for fixing unrest. The other problem is that China expands into some really nice nations like Japan and South Korea, where India's expansion is into Bangladesh, which is about where India currently is, and Pakistan, which is worse. And also Afghanistan, which is even worse. So, it doesn't start great. It doesn't really get going in the way that China does. Well, it gets going in the way that China does, but it takes much longer to get to that point. However, if you want to do an India start, there actually is one major benefit that India gets that neither China nor the US do, which we're going to cover more of later in this video, but it's that India can gobble up a lot of the minor nations with your overall CP cap still being intact. This is because India is 5 points at 26 per, China's 6 points at 38 per, the US is 6 points at 33 per. You cannot afford to hold one of the mid-sized nations at the same time you hold China and the US. It's hard enough just to hold Kazakhstan. Where India, you can actually very comfortably hold several other nations, just not any of the big ones. So that's the TLDR right now for the India start, is if you want to do India, you also have to target another decent set of nations to hold alongside India. My favorites are Australia and New Zealand for reasons we'll get into later in the video. But you could also grab Saudi Arabia in the idea you're eventually going to build a caliphate. You can grab Egypt in the idea of doing the North Africa United Arab League. You could do Russia. You really shouldn't do Russia. You unfortunately don't quite have enough to grab either Indonesia or Japan to make plays at doing a Pacific Defense or Greater Austronesia setup at the same time. But you have options. And funnily enough, if we compare starts, because you can grab all of these minor, very efficient nations, India actually beats out... The India start beats out the China start for overall research points for quite some time. It loses on MC, it loses on money, and it loses on boost, but you do get a little more research, which also means it beats the EU. The other main alternate start that I find very good is what I call the Japan, South Korea, and going into the non-China, Southeast Asia, and Pacific Islands start. This is actually a very strong start. It's honestly comparable to the EU in terms of overall early game potential. It has more RP than the EU, less MC, gets decent boost. You're going to grab Singapore, which means you have a very good boost generator. The problem with this compared to the EU is that while this forms a thing that eventually does actually beat up the EU, it takes a lot longer to get there, and you have to do a lot of research in order to actually unlock it. And that's the biggest problem with doing Japan and South Korea, is the EU already has its federation to gain all of its members. While their early games are comparable, the mid-game of the Japan-South Korea start is just worse than the EU, where you formed your EU, you start making avenues towards China, maybe you do Japan-South Korea then, maybe you grab India, maybe you go into the US, where at that time, they're still dealing with their basic states and have maybe started forming the Pacific Defense League, which is the big research project that you wind up getting for that. Let me just show you what you're going to need to do if you want to do Japan-South Korea. Come on, tech tree. Full search. And that is the first one, is this Pacific Defense League. You get it either for getting the Pan-Asian Combine, which is very expensive, or the End of the American Empire, which is much cheaper. End of American Empire comes from Fall of Empires. It's a relatively cheap research that shows up early, so like, unironically, you're going to want to break up America if you want to do Japan, South Korea, because it's so much cheaper to get that than to get it through the Pan-Asian Combine being formed. Another one that shows up in a similar way is actually the United Commonwealth. This is it's basically the major English-speaking countries besides the United States. It's the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, along with Ireland. If you look at what regions it gets, it also gets some like weird claims in different locations, but it's solid. Like, I'm not going to claim it's and South Africa, yeah. I'm not going to claim it's fantastic, but it honestly is pretty solid because the UK starts with nukes, starts with a decent amount of MC to be built, and you can make this work. It's more one that you might want to grab in the middle of the game if for some reason you're not getting the EU and feeding the UK into that. But let's go into our mid-game, like our notable nations and our mid-game federations that matter. Starting off with everyone's favorite buddy, Kazakhstan. If you've seen my opener videos, you know Kazakhstan is a nation you always want to grab because it has a tremendous amount of boost at the beginning of the game. However, one thing that you may not know as well is Kazakhstan also forms what is called the Central Asian Union, where it gets to gobble up all of the other stans near it, except Afghanistan. And this gives you, for relatively few control points, a good chunk of MC, and a good place to just sit there building funding that's pretty reliably going to stay there. It's also one of the cheaper unions to get. Today's tea is the Osmanthus tea that I had a few videos ago. Still love it. Like, the Central Asian Union, it's not fantastic, but the thing is, if you're holding Kazakhstan anyway, adding these other nations to it gets you plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 MC at almost no cost to yourself. Like, it's one that's just worthwhile to do. The other major one, even if you don't do it as a start, is the United Arab League with Egypt as its leader. It gets a lot of things that you might want to take. Really, what you want to grab is the northern coast of Africa and Saudi Arabia. Like, you grab all of those. These are all the relatively wealthy nations that you can pull into it to build a sizable chunk of mission control. And, it's the start of one of the truly absurd mega-states if you want to build, if you build the Caliphate out, then eat it into the United Arab League, which can also eat most of Africa. It gets truly absurd if you go in the long term, but that's really one for if you know what you're doing and really want to focus on it. And the last one is a federation at the start of the game, which is Australia and New Zealand. Australia and New Zealand are very interesting because Australia does not have New Zealand has a space program, Australia does not. Which means New Zealand can build boost while Australia federates with it and then builds mission control. It gets you, 10 mission control, which is a decent chunk of mission control. And this is also a good time to pivot into minor nations that punch above their weight class. Australia and New Zealand are my favorite ones for this, in both because of that mission control tip, and also because of orgs. Australia's government orgs are truly absurd. They have an org that is a 1-star org that gets you 2 investigation. There is a 1-star, I believe there's a 2-star org that gets you, or I'm not sure if it's a 1 or 2-star that gets you 2 investigation and 1 espionage, but for whatever reason, Australian government orgs are just way better in their weight class of being low-star government orgs than almost anyone else's. The other thing that is unique to Australia, and this is because of how the game models real-life benefits, is at the start of the game, Australia doesn't have an army. Unlike most other 3CP nations, though, Australia is allowed to build a navy. And it also is wealthy, reasonably educated, so once you get its democratic score up to 10, along with, its GDP is fine, and getting its education up to 12, you max out your MC, you build some funding, you can honestly build a pretty sizable military because you have 7 regions to build armies with, each of which can get a navy. You'll have no more IP if you do this. But if you want a surprisingly good military beatstick, Australia actually does the job really well. The UK does for the same reason, and it's the reason why the United Commonwealth is actually one of the better military powers. Something, the British Empire worked for a reason. It's still actually modeled in game partially. But other nations that you might want to consider. So first off, we're going to go with the RP, the really good research point nations. Basically, if you look at a list of all nations and you see how much CP cap it costs to control, if the nation costs less than 2, it's basically always good to grab and hold purely for the research points it gives. This is because there's a minimum amount of research points a nation gives. Let's look at the Central African Republic, which is not exactly a pinnacle of stability or, honestly, almost anything you want. This is still pulling off a 5-to-1 research point to CP cap ratio, and it's pretty easy to fix its problems, because direct investing in a nation this small is really cheap to knock down that very high cohesion problem, or that very high inequality. Also on this list that is a note is Belize. You can invest, even right now, in full guerrilla warfare, this is giving you a 10-to-1 ratio for how many research points you get out of it against your CP cap, which is really good. As a note, one of the reasons why America is good is, I'm just going to do the math right now. 527 research points compared to 34 times 6. So this is America with some problems, and it's at a 2.5-to-1 research cap. Fix this fragmented cohesion, and America goes up to 4-to-1, and honestly, getting better than 4-to-1 is truly insane. It's one of the best uses of your resources you can get. When you're getting up to the 3, 4, and 5 points to hold, though, you really want the nation to actually be stable in and of itself or give you something else before you start spending your CP cap on that. The little EU states that can have 1 MC and give you this nice roughly 4-to-1, fantastic. A+, grab all of them. These random 5 CP African nations that are going to be that are hovering a lot lower because they're unstable. I think Niger's around there. Yeah, this is less than 3-to-1, so really not that worth it to hold. However, off on the western coast, like Liberia, despite being an anocracy, is low enough that it's again, this is a relatively easy fix just through direct investing. And you're still looking at an 8-to-1. So just take it and hold it. The AI might purge you. Whatever. Just purge them back next turn. It really doesn't matter. And then continuing on. So other reasons why you might want to hold a state. Boost producers. Kazakhstan is the most famous of these. It starts with a tremendous amount of boost. The other main early game boost producers that you might want to consider are Israel, because it, again, starts with the ability to produce boost, just builds boost. New Zealand, which is good for the same reason I said before, it starts with the ability to produce boost. You can just get a good amount of boost out of it by putting it on 100% boost. Singapore, which takes until late 2023 for those two to catch up to those two, because it has to grind through building its spaceport. But Singapore is the best boost producer in the game once it actually has the ability to produce boost. And funnily enough, Iran, who also starts the game with a good amount of who starts the game with the ability to actually do this. Like it has more cost associated with it, but Iran gives you some other benefits, like its nuclear program, which is moving us into the next real reason. To finish off boost, the other ones that you may want to consider for smaller ones are Malaysia and Thailand, who also need to build their space program, but are in a pretty good location to build boost once they've finished their space program. And if you're holding the EU and you really need boost right now, you can build it in the Netherlands, because the Netherlands still has Willemstad, which is down here at a very nice place for producing boost. As you can see, it gets a 3.6, where 4.0 is basically the best you're going to get. Spain also has one, but you usually want to build MC in Spain. But continuing on, let's say you're doing a weird out of meta start. This means you may not have a nuclear umbrella. Like Japan and South Korea, neither of them have nukes at game start, and you really want nukes to stop the AI who takes Russia, or the AI who takes India, or the AI who takes the United States from just declaring war on you and stealing your nations. Now, start of game nations that actually have nuclear programs and weapons that you can use to defend against them. Israel, again. Israel is actually a fantastic nation to take and hold if you can, for a variety of reasons. Mossad is also a pretty good org. It gives you some of the rare missions. There's also the UK, and there's Pakistan. All of them start with nuclear barrages. You can take them, ally them with whatever nations you're using. Honestly, I'd say use Israel for this rather than the other two. But we have to also consider who can get a weapon within 6 months of game start. And that's a more complicated list. There's South Africa, who starts with the ability to produce nukes, but does not have any in storage. There's Iran, who starts, within spitting distance of the ability to produce nukes, along with South Korea, who starts, again, within spitting distance. There's Sweden. Sweden also does this. You can see they have 40 of their 80 points. They can get their first nuke pretty quick. Taiwan also starts with some base and a good amount of RP. If you're doing the Japan start, South Korea is a decent pick. Japan, unfortunately, will eventually just do it. And Japan themselves, despite not starting with anything, has 20 IP. You can spend 4 months and get a nuke in Japan, and now you have Japan as your nuclear deterrent for whatever else is going on. There is also Russia, as the Russia's main benefit is its tremendous number of nukes. It's really not useful for anything else. I would say you probably want to grab the UK over Russia if you're going to use it as a nuclear deterrent, because, I don't know, Russia can build 9 more MC, but the UK has 50% more research points at the start of the game, and better boost, and better expansion. Russia can build the poor man's EU, where it's the EU, but worse in every way. So, I don't know. You can do Russia eats the EU if you really want. It's not great. It's really not a good idea, but you can do it. I suppose I'll put that in as an off-meta pick that's a really bad idea, but you can. And lastly, there is North Korea technically has nukes. The problem is North Korea is so unstable, anyone will purge it or coup it, and you can't stop them, so it's not a good deterrent. Technically speaking, I suppose you could have North Korea eat South Korea. This is a bad plan. It's just a bad plan. Don't do it. Just don't do it. It's not good. And let me think if there are any other notable orgs. Nations again with notable orgs. Australia's the big one. Taiwan has an above average admin org that also gets you some research. Kazakhstan has an MC org that gives you assassinate, which is also really good. Israel has Mossad, which I might or might not have in this save. I don't think I do, but it's another fantastic org. Italy has a number of really good criminal orgs for mafia reasons. Yeah, Russia has really solid government and criminal orgs. Sweden has a few good ones. There's also always the US, China, and India, but I don't really think I need to state that the US, China, and India have good orgs. You're not picking those nations up for their orgs anyway. These are nations you might want to grab because their orgs are that good. And a decent chunk of the Middle East has a surprising number of good orgs, mostly in the criminal variety for terrorist groups. Well, it is what it is. The game kind of reflects reality in that way. And I think that's about it for really notable off-meta picks that have a lot of value. I'm sorry, South America. I wish there was a good reason to do South America. There really isn't. You do South America because you want to challenge yourself or clown on people, not because you want to win the game. Africa... There's not a good Africa start, but Africa has a decent mid-game that is primarily based on building up Ethiopia, Nigeria, Tanzania, and Egypt from the beginning to just conquer everything else. And Saudi Arabia eventually lets you form the Caliphate, which is one of the largest endgame groups, but doesn't have a really solid start of game or mid-game. And that is pretty much it. Oh, sorry. No, also, should probably just mention Indonesia. The big thing for Indonesia is Greater Indonesia gets claims on other things that get a lot of claims. And that's where Indonesia can blob out of control and eat a ton of, all of these areas. Because, it can eat all the islands, obviously enough, right? But we go to the Philippines. Philippines has no claims on anything. Let's check another capital. Wait, that's the wrong one. Madagascar has no claims on anything. Unfortunately, Taipei is not the capital of the Republic of China, so you cannot eat China with Indonesia anymore. You actually sort of used to be able to. It was a little silly. Singapore has no claims. Which was the one I was thinking of? Let me go check Thailand. Let me check Malaysia. Malaysia's how you get Indonesia in there. Yeah, I thought there was a way to eat Japan. I'm trying to remember how you do it. Bangkok. I thought there was a way. There might not. It might have been an old version of the game. But Indonesia can gobble up a pretty large amount of territory, and this is the reason why Japan's Pacific Defense League competes with it in part, but not entirely. So you do North Korea, Japan, they grab a lot of this, and then Indonesia instead grabs Southeast Asia. And you have, as said, basically something as big or not bigger than the EU. It just takes longer to do. And that's it. Nice and short video today. I hope you all have a lovely evening and are beating the heat. I know I'm not. It's terrible outside. Hopefully the heat wave is over soon, and have a good one. Bye.